Let's get into the quarterback rankings. I'm not going to be showing them. So what I'll be doing, just so you guys know, like, and if I lose you, I'll lose you. But what I'll be doing on the stream is just talking about the tiers that I have these running backs in their matchups. And then I will have the actual rankings because I care more about tiers than I do rankings. Okay. So I'm providing rankings as a supplement to everything else in Dub Club because I was asked for it. Last year, I told y'all I don't do rankings. Normally I do tiers, but I took my time and I said I'm gonna start doing rankings and I'll add a lot more to the Excel sheet. But I'm gonna do that for you guys. So if that's something that works this year, we're gonna evaluate it this year. If it works, I'll forever do that. If that's something that you guys like, but if it doesn't and y'all don't show enough love to it, then I'm probably not going to do that. But for now on the stream, what I will do is talk about tiers. I'll go over maybe somebody that's in the tier that you're not expecting, somebody that's not, and I'll continue to go through the positions, all right? So I'll probably be about 10, 15 minutes through each position. I just want to set the stage for that this season, okay? That's how it's going to go. If you guys got questions, thoughts, changes you want to see on that, just let me know. You guys know I'll adapt, all right? So let's start with the quarterback rankings. And in this tier, this is where I put players that I think can get to like 100, that can get to like 20 fantasy points. That's kind of what I'm doing. Hold on a second. Putting players in here that I think can get to around 20 fantasy points, all right? So this is your high-end to mid-tier QB1s. For your 10-team leagues, these should be like rock solid QB1s. So in this tier, I have Josh Allen, who's going against Arizona, which obviously Josh Allen every single week is a threat, especially in the ground game. I talked about him on the live stream. We got Josh Allen against Arizona, Pat Mahomes against the Ravens. And on Thursday night with Pat Mahomes, that should be a very interesting matchup because that Baltimore defense is tough. They lost some pieces over the offseason. I know Patrick Queen is in Pittsburgh now, but I still think this team is out for blood and kind of looking to say, all right, we deserve revenge. And so I can see Pat Mahomes not struggling a little bit, but just being contained a little bit. He's still my number 2 overall. And I think we got bigger days ahead. So this is more of a floor play. Patrick Mahomes is more of a floor play here. In this tier as well is Anthony Richardson, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, CJ Stroud, right? So these are still all in the one tier for me, right? Anthony Richardson going up against a very tough Houston defense. And I think for the most part, I expect Anthony Richardson to be in this tier throughout the entire season, no matter the matchup. This is a QB-proof type matchup. The same reason I have Pat Mahomes in this tier. This is just a player that should have a 20-point floor. And as far as Jalen Hurts, like I have him in this tier, but I also want to see what it looks like with him rushing the football. Do we still get the same amount of attempts? Do we still get the same amount of end zone looks, red zone looks at the goal line specifically for Jalen Hurts? If that's changed, he's probably going to start to drop to the back end of this tier or maybe completely out. And then to kind of finish off this tier right here, Jaden Daniels, Tua Tagovailoa, and Kyler Murray. Jaden Daniels up against Tampa Bay. Tua Tagovailoa up against Jacksonville, and Kyler Murray at Buffalo. Now, when it comes to Jaden Daniels, a lot of people are probably like, man, you either drafted him knowing you wanted him to be your QB1, or maybe you paired him up with a safer option, and now you're debating. This is a matchup where I would play Jaden Daniels and feel very confident about his ability to get 20 fantasy points. Played well in the preseason. We know he uses his legs. He showed his legs in the red zone even in preseason, and we know he's with a good coach offensively that will let him air things out with Cliff Kingsbury. So I think Jaden Daniels will be safe, and it's a matchup against Tampa. Tampa has some holes defensively. They're a decent defense, but they do have some holes defensively that I think they can exploit. So I'm with Jaden Daniels here. I know against zone, typically, you want to see more man coverage where they can exploit the rushing a little bit. I still think Jaden Daniels is good. I like him in this spot. And then when it comes to Tua, right? Now, Tua is the player that I have probably in this bracket that normally I wouldn't put in here, right? Like in the second half of the year, I'm not going to put Tua in the top 10 to 7 quarterbacks. It's just probably not going to happen because I think there's upside for more. But in a matchup against Jacksonville, second highest scoring matchup, Vegas at least has it as the second highest scoring matchup on the board. There's potential for a lot of points here, and this could be shootout territory. So I think when I look at this spot right here for Tua, I think it's a good spot for Tua, and there's a lot of potential offense with him, especially, early on, there's always a new wrinkle from this Miami offense. Last year, we saw with Tyreek Hill in the motion before the snap. And I think we'll see something else. They kind of hinted to it a little bit in preseason. I was watching. They were using their running backs out of the backfield in motion. So I want to see how this plays out. If that's something they do, quick swing passes to the running backs. I'll be very interested to see what that looks like. But Tua is also in that elite tier. So just to run it back, Josh Allen against Arizona, Pat Mahomes against Baltimore, Anthony Richardson against Houston, Lamar against KC, Jalen Hurts against GB. We got CJ Stroud against Indy, Jaden Daniels against Tampa, Tua against Jacksonville, and Kyler against Buffalo. All right, that's the elite tier. Second tier quarterbacks. Second tier. We got Jared Goff, Jordan Love, Trevor Lawrence. Let me go. Jared Goff versus the Rams, Jordan Love at Philly, Trevor Lawrence at Miami, Matt Stafford at Detroit, Joe Burrow versus New England, and then Baker Mayfield versus Tampa. So I think all these guys are tier 2. None of them really has like 20-point potential in this thing. Maybe if you call Jordan Love, Jared Goff, you're in there. You know what I'm saying? Like those two have it. I think Baker potentially, but I think there's just more risk associated with these guys that they don't see that potential. Whereas the guys I have in the elite tier, almost a certainty, in my opinion, for 20 points. Jared Goff and Matthew Stafford specifically in this, one of the higher scoring matchups on the board. Matthew Stafford typically wouldn't be in this range. We put him in here because of the matchup. Obviously, both of these teams have history with each other, the Goff-Stafford Bowl, whatever you want to call it. But both of these players should put up decent fantasy points. I'd feel comfortable starting them. And I think this week more so than probably in future weeks, we have a lot of good options as starting quarterback, a lot of good options. So there's going to be a lot of start and sit questions that probably come my way or you're going to face dilemma-wise. I would say this. If you have a player with the higher ceiling, I would chase that earlier on. Chase the ceiling earlier on. We can deal with floor later when you need to get wins. For week 1, start the player with the higher ceiling. So if I have him in the 1 tier and you're debating him, you're asking me, I'm probably going to give you that answer. And as far as Trevor Lawrence, I talked about Tua earlier. I think he belongs in this tier. This tier 2. And he's right there. Like he's a top 12 option for me this week, but he's still in this tier because I want to see how it looks with these, with Gabe Davis, with Brian Thomas. These are newer receivers. How do they put it all together in a matchup that does profile to be pretty high scoring? So Trevor Lawrence to me is in this tier as well. And then I have Baker in this tier, which Baker was being drafted outside of the top 15 quarterbacks, damn near QB 20. But in a matchup against Washington, who has a suspect defense, a lot of changes this offseason for Washington. This is a player that I think could have a special day here. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. I'll talk about them here in a minute. I feel like I'm going too long on the tiers. How do you guys feel like? I feel like I'm going too long on the quarterbacks. We'll see how it plays out. I'm just going to go for the length that I want, and then we can adjust this shit later on. And then I'll answer questions between tiers. I'll catch up on questions between tiers. Tier 3, a couple names that are in this tier that you guys probably wouldn't expect. Dak Prescott against Cleveland. We got Brock Purdy against the Jets. Kirk Cousins against Pittsburgh. Caleb Williams against Tennessee, Geno Smith against Denver. And all 5 of those defenses to me are going to be vastly improved. Maybe Denver is probably the one that's not as improved, but Patrick Surtain just signed a contract. I think there's some exploitability in this Denver defense, but we know he shuts down one side of the field. So when you got Cleveland for Dak, you got the Jets for Brock Purdy, you got Pittsburgh for Kirk Cousins, you got Tennessee for Caleb. I just feel like these are tougher matchups than on paper they look, especially the Tennessee matchup for Caleb Williams. That doesn't appear to be like a super strong matchup. Obviously, Mike Vrabel was there last year. On paper, it was, but that secondary was vulnerable. This season, they signed L'Jarius Sneed, have a brand new coaching staff. Caleb is a rookie. I have him down here in tier 3. Some other quarterbacks I think are here in this tier 3. Sam Darnold, who I think, we were getting him outside of damn near for free. He's probably on waivers in most leagues. I think he's a startable asset this week against the Giants. He's in my top 20 for the week. We also got Justin Herbert against the Raiders. We have Aaron Rodgers against the Niners, Daniel Jones against the Vikings, Will Levis against the Bears, Deshaun Watson against Dallas, and Russell Wilson ends this tier against Atlanta. So these are back-end QB2 options for me this week. Mid-tier to back-end QB2s, high-end QB3s, all of them kind of fit the same profile to me. I can see Deshaun Watson having a really good day. I can see him being risky. I don't think Dak goes as crazy as we think. Going into Cleveland against that vaunted Browns defense was shutting down quarterbacks last year, shut down receivers last year. I think they have some struggles. So I look at this tier as a very risky tier. These aren't guys I'd want to start week one. I'd hope to have other options, but if they're lower quarterbacks and I put them in this tier, that means I have a little bit more optimism. If I have higher quarterbacks in this tier, then that means that I have a little bit more caution exercise and they can still outplay it. It's just more risk. So I would call this more of a risky tier. One of the players that's in this tier that I think is semi-risky, but I think I think we can expect him to at least have a touchdown and 200 yards. Aaron Rodgers is like a 200 to 250 yard guy, a touchdown or two. So that's a player I think could outplay this range as well. That's in there, but the risk associated. What does he look like off of a year of football? There's just a lot of questions when it comes to this entire tier, and that's why I have him here in this tier 3. Tier 4 is set by, obviously Derek Carr going against Carolina. Great defense out there in Carolina. Should be improved this year as well. And they were stout last year against quarterbacks. Bryce Young against New Orleans. So that profiles as a lower scoring game. Bo Nix at Seattle. Gardner Minshew against the Chargers. And Jacoby Brissett against Cincinnati. These are just lower end options that I don't think have a lot of upside. Could they be QB2s? Yeah. Could they outperform my bottom, the bottom of my rankings? Absolutely they could. But for now, I got these guys as bottom tier options. I would not be looking to start them.